need to check if anybody from Caterpillar is here first, because there's another contrarian decision that we took. And this requires convincing, where you can have a global CEO and you can have a country head, but it requires convincing of all the functional heads as well, which means that we had to engage with each one of our functional heads to let them experience India, which means embed them in India. And one of the things that we found that in most countries, these equipments are sold to contractors or the government. In India, 40% of our buyers are first-time buyers. And we have what we call the Chotu operator-owner combination. In every machine, there's the owner, there's the operator, and there's Chotu. Chotu is the one who helps around, busybody, runs around. The owner, within 3 years, is able to buy another machine, and then he hires more operators because it runs. The operator's ambition is to become an owner. We have to make sure funding is available at all points in time, and so we have NBFCs doing it. So the operator very soon becomes an owner. The Chotu's ambition is to become an operator in 4 or 5 years, and in 10 years, become an owner. And we've got thousands of such stories that we don't have to rely on contractors and on the government. Had we taken that route, India would have been a very, very small market for us. So that was just another this thing. But it required a lot of convincing to go around, to explain what Chotu operator and owner is, and it takes a long time.
And what did you call the Chotu in the British Islands?
See, just as the word Jugaad has gone around all over the world, Chotu is well known in our company.
That's wonderful. Any comments on this?
I think Vipin made a very important point, and that is clearly one cannot disagree with the global CEO who has a vision and a desire to make India work. A country head whose voice gets heard and in fact hopefully has enough courage and conviction to make that voice be heard. But you cannot just have that in an MNC. And exactly as Vipin says, there are many functional layers in a matrix which you have to carry with you. And it's irritating, it's bureaucratic, but you cannot ignore it. And therefore, your own top team and who they talk to, so first a buy-in by your own top team, and then for all those functional guys who ultimately also get to the CEO, so that what the CEO hears finally is one voice coming through 7 people, but it's the same messaging. And that's the whole communication, which has to cut through the bureaucracy. But at the end of the day, it's important to have on side.
Oh, I very much agree with what has been said. Headquarters is exactly like the government of India.
Yeah.
Lots of people may not be able to make a decision, but every one of them has a veto when it comes to stopping a decision. And so your job as the country head is to carry that whole mass along and walk the file from desk to desk and do all that's needed.
Yeah, but
so if you don't do that, you
but I'd want to add exactly what Ravi set up at the beginning, that if any of them believe you don't have the connect with the global CEO, you've had it. So having that connect is absolutely, as he said, critical. But you have to manage the other space.
Yeah. Let me move to another subject, and I'd like to start with Nandan. You talk a lot about building leadership in India beyond the country manager, that the quality of the people that you hire and the leadership development, given the shortage of leaders in most companies, turns out to be very critical. Right? That was one of the themes that you, and I wondered if you wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, certainly. Obviously, that's an issue, and I think there again, getting this globalization, localization, centralization, decentralization right is very important, because if the local operation is a cookie cutter template that's imported from outside, then no aspiring young leader would even want to work there, because he knows that he's going to be slotted into this assembly line operation. So I think even for aspiring leaders, they'd rather go and work somewhere where there's some maneuver to, wiggle room to do things differently. So I think getting the right leaders or right aspirant leaders is the flip side of the level of autonomy and innovation that you permit. And I think most companies struggle with getting this balance right, because obviously there are some functions and some strategic issues that you do need to have a global template. At the same time, you need enough space for the local guys to do his own thing. And most companies, I find, fail in getting that right. And that's probably why the number of companies who actually make it in his book are not that many, because they don't get this balance right.
Can you comment on that?
No, on leadership, I reflect on my own challenges building two fairly large companies. I think two things are absolutely critical, and very few get this right. The first one is you've absolutely got to have growing leaders as a condition for promotion to senior positions. If any company where you can get promoted simply by hitting the numbers is never going to grow leaders, okay? And that's 9 out of 10 of them. So unless growing leaders, like in your old firm or current firm, a condition
Everyone
for promotion.
thinks I've retired. I don't know what the story is.
I don't know. So if you don't fix that as a policy, you're not going to become a talent engine. And the second is you've got to take huge number of bets on young people. Okay? This myth of, hey, this person's not ready now is absolutely lethal. You have to spot people with a certain spark and put them in roles and give them challenges vastly bigger than they're ready for. And then they grow out to fill. If you look at every one of us, we wouldn't be here today if at some stage somebody hadn't made that bet and given us a job that was vastly greater than our ability at that point in time. But companies are not systematic about that. So I'd say if any company that wants to get its talent engine going, these are the two things.
I'm going to put everyone on the spot now and ask you a question. And then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. This is to test whether you really read the book.
Please. You proved it. What else you done?
So what do you think was missing? I mean, we've all agreed, right? You're all Superman leaders, Supermen and Superwomen leaders.
No, not at all.
Successful companies.
Adil,
what was missing from what
in all of this, there's a huge element of luck. And I think that's very important. India took off at a time when we kind of started investing, or vice versa. There's a huge element of luck, and I give you an example of how we were lucky, and I think my luck might be running out, and I'll give you both these examples. When there was the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, we had already got approval to set up what later became the world's largest plant in Faridabad for making a certain kind of machine. And the structures were up, and I was asked all the time, do you still think it's a good idea? And somehow or the other, we stayed with it because the demotivation of not setting up that plant would have been massive. Luckily, India came back very quickly. We're trying the same thing by setting up 2 new plants now. And I have a feeling at the rate we are going, luck might or might not favor us. But I think luck plays a certain amount of an element.
I think Ravi's covered it all. I refuse to think he's left out anything. So, great book, everything there.
Well, I'll suggest something, but he may tell me it's there on page 173, so I'll let it. No, I think one of the big things is designing for challenging infrastructure. I think, you design sturdier vehicles because the roads are not good enough, or you design longer energy efficient fuel thing because you don't get fuel often, or you design a prepaid phone because there's no credit. So essentially what a lot of the smart companies have done is working around the infrastructure bottlenecks. In some sense, they've created products to circumvent that. I think that point could have been a little more emphasized. I don't think you did it, right?
I thought about it, but I didn't develop it fully the way you suggest. But thank you, that's a great point. But it also includes other, for instance, at Infosys, the transportation infrastructure, the campus,
build the whole ecosystem.
The whole system, not just the product, end to end has to be designed for lacunas.
Exactly. So I think infrastructure challenges leads to a whole new set of innovation.
Yeah.
When we met and a couple of times that we talked, I think we start on the hardware and we always end up on the software. And going through the book, I felt that you capture quite a lot, not what I have said, but probably you emphasized at the beginning about this mindset. And I think that The book reveals this element of the personality of the company, if I say the DNA of the company, has to succeed in the conditions like that. Because if we start to sit and complain about roads, power, you don't move. And I think the not saying that he captured, but what I like to see in the book, reading, was that many elements of the conversation, long hours of the conversation, you really struck, which I agree with you, more important, with the mindset. It has to make it happen, it has to win. There is no other option.
I agree.
Is there anything that you would have liked to have put in the book?
No, I'll tell you what very nearly got left out, though, which is something that I'm surprised you haven't asked. The book was done and it went for peer review, because HBR is this process of peer review. And the reviews came, CEOs, academics, whatever. It's blind, I don't know. And there was a lot of feedback, generally positive, but 5 out of 5 reviewers said, hey, haven't you left out something important? How do you deal with corruption? How can you pretend to write a book on India, a how-to manual, if you don't have anything there on how to deal with corruption? So the editor said, of course, you better write a chapter on corruption. And so I sort of got busy and cranked out chapter 8. So in my view, that was one that sort of very nearly got left out. And I say this only because I've come back from a US tour, a book tour, and I've spent hours and hours in front of US media. And the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 topic is only corruption. Okay? And we never got around to number 6 or anything nearly as substantive as you've asked. And I think that's a real moment of truth for us.
Okay, I'm going to add one other comment which I thought you could add a little more. You have it through all your stories. But one other comment, and it may be more particularly about India than maybe in other countries, although I believe it applies to most emerging countries, which is just the importance of relationships in India. And, you know, therefore the need for the kind of executive and the management team and others, just because relationships between everything, between customer, supplier, between the company and your chotu, right, that your 50,000 chotus that you deal with, or whatever the number is, right, and just this whole nature of personal relationship somehow seems to be it's less anonymous and stronger in India. And I don't know quite where you captured it in different stories, but I thought that was another aspect.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's one thing I felt after the book had gone to the press, which is that I hadn't done enough service to the importance of relationships. Because at the end of the day, when formal systems and structures are weak and ineffective, you're ultimately dependent on personal relationships to get things done. And it certainly applies in terms, and also in India there is this expectations among employees that they would have some sort of an emotional connection with their leaders.
But you cover that.
I covered that a little bit, but at every stage relationships are important. The employee relationship, the relationship with bureaucrats, with politicians of every party, with your own folks back at headquarters. If you don't have relationships with people across functions, not just the top, but the middle and the bottom, you're not going to get done. So one of the most critical roles of a country head, okay, or any senior person in the organization, is to cultivate this rich web of relationships. It's the currency by which anything gets done. I think that could be much stronger, but thank you for pointing that out.
But I actually, in Ravi's defense, think he covered it, because what stuck out when I read it was exactly that you have, I think you refer to the fact that because of upbringing, Indians tend to be competitive by nature. And you then talk about how the overarching theme, therefore, is for a good leader who comes to manage this competitive nature and drive the process through relationships and ensuring that it works. And I think, to me, that's quite telling, because the only way you get competitive people to work together is to somehow bring a team spirit in, because otherwise people are going to pull in different directions. And you say as much. So in defense of you, I think you cover that.
I appreciate that defense. But you know, even to this day, people are mystified as to how a bloke would spend 16 years building diesel engines and gensets ever survived in a software company. In fact, Nandan was one of the handful of guys I asked, hey, should I do this crazy thing? And he said, don't, you're going to get butchered. And I went ahead anyway. By the way, it was the same advice I got from my mom, so I ignored her too. But the thing that I found that was common, and now I have the confidence to go into any arena and repeat it, is it's fundamentally about relationships. That's all it is. And so, thank you, Naina, but I wish I'd done slightly better in terms of the importance of this.
Okay, I think on that note, first let me thank the panelists for being great sports and answering the questions and having read the book and done their homework. Thank you very much. And of course, thank you to Ravi for consenting to take all my questions. And a big thank you to HBR, which is publishing, Harvard Business School Publishing, the club, and the Taj for hosting it. And I think some of the panelists and Ravi will be around a little bit, so you can have a drink and ask them all your questions. Thank you. Thanks.
Very